great.
Okay, well, we are going to get started. I think there'll probably be some others that will continue to file in, but certainly, we've got a full presentation and want to make sure that you guys have all of the time that you need this morning. And so I'll start with some comments, and then I will introduce our speakers. So one, good morning to everyone. This is Leonardo McClarty, and I'm the president of the Howard County Chamber. For those of you whom I haven't had an opportunity to meet in person, and maybe this is our first time interacting, but I'm the president here at the Howard County Chamber, and I'd like to welcome you to our Govconnects Bizbreakfast, which I guess we all will just have it over perhaps a cup of coffee this morning and not an actual formal breakfast that we typically have. But if you're new, this format in this program is something that we do typically once a quarter, where we bring in various federal and state agencies to talk about procurement and acquisition opportunities, as well as what are going to be priority spends and the like, with the primary focus being for our members and guests within the business community to have an opportunity as to, again, how to go about growing their business, particularly if they're government contractors. And so we're excited today to have with us representatives from GSA, who's going to be providing an overview of category management, spend under management, best-in-class contracts pertaining to GSA schedules. And so we have with us David Park, who is our National Account Manager, and Marcelo Alasquega, who is the Director of Customer Engagement Solutions Development Division. And then also joining them is Sandra McIntyre. And I'm sorry, I don't have Sandra's, official title, but I know she will introduce herself as she chimes in a little bit later. But before, officially recognizing both David and Marcelo in terms of some of their backgrounds, I want to just recognize some of our annual partners. And the Chamber has each year, the slide will advance. There we go. Our annual partners who ultimately help us put on our programming and so forth throughout the course of the year. And so currently we like to recognize Tower Federal Credit Union, Uninet, Aronson, Creatrix, Edwards Performance Solutions, HR New, Prescott HR, and Phoenix Training Systems as our annual partners. And then also for our Govconnects Biz Breakfast, our Biz Breakfast specific sponsors are Katz Abosh and Pilar Matza. Also want you to just note, and I'll come back and touch on some of the upcoming events that you see on your screen as well. But again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to our annual partners. And so I'm going to now get ready to stop the share on my end and get ready to introduce our speakers, and then they're going to actually share their screens on their end. And so, let's see here. I'll let this continue to scroll through. But David Park, as I mentioned, is a National Account Manager within the Federal Acquisition Service at the U.S. General Service Administration. He services the following accounts: the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency, and prior to assuming his current position at the Federal Acquisition Service, Mr. Park worked in GSA's Public Building Service as Supervisor Realty Specialist, National Account Manager, and Building Manager. He has over 17 years of federal service, all of this being with GSA. He holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Information Technology and Finance from the University of Maryland at College Park. Also, Marcelo Alasquega is the Director of Customer Engagement and Solutions Development Division, which is CESDD for the Office of Information Technology category in GSA's Federal Acquisition Service. He's responsible for buying platforms and acquisition services to the federal, state, and local governments for a broad range of items, ranging from office supplies to motor vehicles to information technology and telecommunication products and services. As an organization within FAS, ITC provides access to a wide range of commercial and custom IT products, services, and solutions. And so with that, I'm going to get ready to turn things over to David, and they will get started on their team.
To the right, because I have two monitors, so I'm trying to watch everything at the same time. I guess I can go first. So let's see, this will stop sharing from screen. So I'm going to take over. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. I'm just trying to drag my mouse over. And if you just give me 1 second, let me just make sure I have a mouse working. So hopefully you all can see my screen. And I'm going to, as Leonardo mentioned, I'm going to talk about category management, spend under management best-in-class contracts. And so with that, let's kind of get started. And you'll all get a copy of this presentation as well as Marcelo's later. I was literally telling Leonardo I was working on this up until 18 minutes ago.
And David, if I can interrupt you just one second. Do
Sure.
you want questions now, or do you want to get through your slides first? How do you want to handle questions?
I can go either way. I don't mind taking them as we go, just because it's kind of fresh in people's mind. So I'll just try to be more mindful to kind of pause every once in a while just to make sure it allows people to ask questions.
Okay, so for those of you, when you have questions, if you would, you'll see the Q&A box that should be down at the bottom of your screen. And so if you would just I'll be monitoring that. And so if you would just place your questions there. And then when we have a moment, I'll either raise my hand or something and flag David or Marcelo or Sandra down, and we'll stop and take those questions.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm trying to keep my right eye looking at this right screen, but if I just don't see you, Leonardo, if you're waving at me or something, definitely just stop me and just say, hey, can you just go back a slide and answer a question? That's not a problem. Okay. Why is this not going? All right, so category management. I'm not sure how many of you know what category management is, but I'm just going to give you the definition of it and then just talk about exactly what does that mean for federal government. So when we think category management, it's really just a retailing purchasing concept. It's actually been around for quite a bit because every time you go to a grocery store or a Target or a Walmart, you notice that there are all these different aisles or what we call product categories. And you notice the cereal aisle is going to have cereals. You shouldn't see, I don't know, kids' toys or shovels in the cereal aisle. It just doesn't make any sense. You're trying to make sure you have very similar and related items and products in that aisle. So that's category management in a nutshell. When we talk about category management from a government perspective, what we're trying to do is reduce that contract duplication and better leverage our buying power. And let me give you a perfect example. So Marcelo, myself, and Sandra, we all work for GSA. We work for different offices within GSA, and say we need to buy laptops. The stereotypical thing in government would be every single office buys their own laptops. Buy 3 here, buy 5, buy 50, buy 10. I mean, it makes sense. We're only buying for ourselves. But when we really think about it, wouldn't it have been a lot easier and it'd be less paperwork for us and for you as a vendor if we were to consolidate all of our purchases to say 1,000, 5,000? Now all of a sudden you just get one large order, and we as the government are now leveraging our buying power because when we're buying that much quantity, we should be getting a better price. When we're all buying it individually per office, one of us might be getting a great deal, but another person may not be. So that's kind of why we're incorporating that thought process within the government. And then the last thing about category management I want to point out, and I will cover this later, is using best-in-class contracts. I'm not sure if there are any questions about that. If not, I'm going to keep on trucking along. And like I said, feel free to ask questions whenever you'd like. So this particular slide, I am not going to go over in great detail. When you get a copy of the presentation, feel free to sit there and check out the OMB memos as well as the FAR clauses that are referencing category management, how we're implementing it, how they're these targets that I'll talk about a little bit later. But this is just more here for those that are really big on policy or you want to kind of understand exactly how did this all kind of evolve. You know, here are the references here that you want to read up on just to kind of understand what's happened with category management. Because it's been around now within the government, at least from a civilian standpoint, for the past, I want to say, 3 years. All right, so I'm talking about category management, but we got to sit there and talk about the categories. So I had to break this up into 2 different slides just because it was too much to fit on one slide and everything would be too small. So what you're looking at right now are what we call the 10 common government categories. I think the more notable ones that people probably are familiar with are professional services and IT, but at the same time, you can kind of see that facility and construction is big, industrial products and services. Really, all of these are very big categories. But what I love about this particular slide is we don't just tell you what the 10 common spend categories are at that, what we call level 1 area. We actually go down to level 2 and break it down. So just telling you, oh, IT is a really big category, but you don't exactly understand where the spend goes in IT. So what we've done here is kind of show you at that level 2, which exactly, I guess, what you call subcategory, where's all that money going? So if you're a small business, you're trying to get into government, you're trying to figure out which exact category do I want to go into, but then you can even go down by a subcategory and kind of isolate, oh, this is where I want to be. I want to be in the IT outsourcing, because obviously it's pretty lucrative right there. But maybe you might think, hey, I'm really good at consulting, even though maybe there's not as much money in it versus outsourcing. So it just kind of gives you an idea of how to kind of navigate through all the categories and where all that spend's going. And this is all FY 2019. You can actually go back a few more years or even look at 20, but I think we're just giving you a full year's worth of 19 would just be a kind of good understanding of how much the government spent last year total. And if you can see in the top right corner, it's $582 billion. But I also don't want to be remiss to talk about the 9 defense-centric categories. Now, being more of a civilian national account manager, I don't dwell on the defense, but obviously for those of you that work with DoD agencies, these are the 9 specific ones to them. Again, also broken from that level 1 in totality, what their spend is, but also goes down to that level 2 to kind of understand exactly where is the money going within each larger category. All right, so spend under management, what is that? Because a lot of people don't understand what it is and how to calculate it, so I'm going to kind of walk you through it. So starting from left to right, tier 0 is what we call unmanaged spend. Basically, that's open market. And that is what OMB wants every federal agency to do, is kind of move away from that. Now, with that said, there are a lot of items out there, they're not on a government contract vehicle, so a government agency has no choice but to go open market. But if you're sitting there telling me, oh, you know, I can't get an engineer or an accountant or a nurse, I have to go open market, there is no existing government contract vehicle, that's when, for those of us, especially in my position, as well as others within the federal government, we're going to push back and say, well, there actually really are some government contracts out there that could help you get that professional service or get you that commodity that you want. You just may not be aware of that. So we're trying to move agencies away from it, but obviously there's always going to be some tier 0 there that you just cannot remove. As you move to the right, you look at tier 1. So we're talking about agency-wide mandatory solutions, and the example in that yellow at the bottom is an Air Force contract called NetSense. I manage HHS, as Leonardo mentioned earlier. That's my main customer. So if you work with HHS, let's say NIH, National Institutes of Health, you might think, oh, the NIPAC contract. Technically, that would be a tier 1 because it's within HHS and there is mandatory policy. But because they actually applied for a tier 3, which I'll cover momentarily, they're actually a tier 3 contract, not a tier 1. So those are like a tier 1, agency-wide, only within that specific agency can you use it, and you have to have mandatory policy behind using it as well. So when you move up to tier 2, we're talking about now government-wide contracts that any agency can use. So think about our multiple award schedules. When you move up to tier 3, it's actually the same thing as 2 from the standpoint of it's still talking about government-wide contract vehicles, but these are the vehicles now that have applied for that best-in-class designation. They're going to have the best pricing, the best vendors. So that's how they get that designation. And they actually have to reapply every single year to get it. So I always try to tell our federal customers, just because you see a contract today in this fiscal year as best in class, they may or may not be the following year, depending on their application, whether they apply again and whether or not the application gets approved. So just kind of want to clarify that between tier 2 and tier 3. So when we talk about best-in-class solutions from a GSA standpoint, we're thinking like Oasis, our professional services contract, or Alliant for IT services. And then to kind of sum it up, how do you calculate spend under management? I get this question all the time. So all you have to do is add the spend for tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1, and that's how you get spend under management. So now I'm going to kind of talk about best-in-class contracts. So there's kind of this rumor or this myth out there that, oh, best-in-class contracts, they're all mandatory. And if I'm not on one of those contracts, then I'm not going to get any business from the government. So I definitely want to debunk that myth that the slide that you're looking at here is slide number 8. These are the only really mandatory best-in-class contract solutions. These are just, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we talk about like about 10 total, and you can see which specific category they're under. Like the one I'm the most familiar with, and Marcel can always talk about this, you know, when he's speaking about Schedule 70, is laptops and desktops. Like that's the one that I always see the most that's being used. And there's only 4 contracts, I guess, yeah, 4 contracts that can really get laptops and desktops. It's either us, NASA SUB, NITAC, or Army Chess. But now I'm going to show you in slide 9, these are all of the best-in-class contract solutions, and you're going to see that some of them are mandatory from the slide before, but everything else that's not covered as mandatory is what we're going to say is preferred. We like contracting officers to use these contracts, but they still, at the end of the day, make that final decision on whether they think this is in the best interest of their agency and their procurement to use these contracts. You may see them choose not to use it and go back to either a tier 2 or a tier 1. Again, we always try to encourage using tier 3, but again, only those 10 that you saw before are really mandatory. These are more just, again, they're preferred contracts that we like for them to use, but again, they don't have to if they don't want to. Now this slide, I made this slide because I get this question all the time. David, I'm a new business. I don't know which contract I should be on, or maybe you are on a government contract, but you're not sure if you're on the right one. So what I did was I went into one of the dashboards that I'm going to show you a little bit later and basically pulled all the spend data from FY16 to 19. Now, please note that when I pulled this, this is what the data looks like right now. If you pull it a week from now, a month from now, it's going to change slightly. So at least at this moment in time, from a best-in-class contract in terms of top 20, that's what it looks like. And then also from a tier 2 top 20, that's what the information looks like. I'm not going to sit there and tell you to get on a GSA contract, despite the fact that they're, at least at this moment in time, they're sitting both first and best-in-class in tier 2, because that's your time and money as a vendor to figure out which one makes the most sense. I'm just merely showing you all the data so that you can kind of make your own decision about which one you'd like to be on. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the dashboards, and I'm going to see if I can pull this off. Let me actually, I want to actually do a live demo. Oh, sure.
And while you do that, we have our first question here. And the question states that many small businesses complain about the difficulty in getting a prime position on GWACs and AWACs. On-ramps are infrequent and the qualifications to prime are onerous. What is GSA doing to update its policies and practices to encourage and make it easier for new, young, or innovative companies to actively participate in these vehicles?
And if Marcel or Sandra, you want to jump into, I mean, I can just sit there and tell you that I know for, I want to say our Oasis contract, they just did an on-ramp. I know for some of our other GWACs, they're about to do on-ramping. For schedules, if you're not familiar, we call that an evergreen contract. So that means you can get on today, tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. That's actually the beautiful thing about schedules. You can get on at any time. I do agree that with our GWACs, they don't have that kind of robustness where they can actually on-ramp whenever. You just have to kind of know the cycle. And I'm going to kind of show you guys a website later that will hopefully kind of help you understand what that cycle looks like. So this way you're aware of when the on-ramps are. In terms of the rest of the question, I don't know if Marcelo, Sandra, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think the on-ramps are very difficult because even though if you show a cycle, if they're not prepared to do it, they won't have the on-ramp until it's the right moment. And what that means, for example, is with, say, STARS 2, so it's 8A. If the majority of the vendors haven't graduated, then there's no reason to have an on-ramp. And on the other hand, if a lot of the vendors have graduated from that program and now are considered a large entity or a large company, then it is the time to have the on-ramp. So even though David may show a cycle, and we do try to schedule things, it really depends on the situation as well. For Alliant Large, which is completely different, different type of GWAC, we don't see many on-ramps happening with that. We do know that it's been very, very popular, this latest version of Alliant. And what we are talking about now is, are we going to hit the ceiling sooner than we thought? Because its popularity has just been astronomical. So maybe we'll come out with another version of Alliance. But again, I'm just talking of ideas. That's just my personal I think what I feel about things, maybe they won't do that. We're not directly in that program, but we do hear information about it. And that's some of the conversations that are taking place right now.
Hopefully we kind of answered that question, Leonardo. Do you need us to kind of go any further?
I think that took care of it.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm showing you now is a live demo of this dashboard, and you can see the link there, so if you want to screenshot real quick, you can grab it, but I will give you this link when we get to the end of my presentation. So I'm going to quickly go through these 6 different dashboards that are actually available to you as a vendor. This took so much complaining on my part because what you see here was really only for federal employees, which I thought was great. But then as I interacted more with vendors, I realized a lot of the questions you were asking could be actually addressed by this dashboard. They finally built this out, I want to say about, 4 months ago, give or take, maybe 4 or 5. And I was telling Leonardo this morning, they actually kind of refreshed the look and feel of it. So I'm still trying to get used to it again because it looks a little bit different than before. So what I'm going to do is start from the left and work all the way to the right. So let's look at the executive summary dashboard. And I'm just going to go over a few tabs in it, but obviously once you have the link yourself, you can sit there and play around with it as much as you like. So I'm going to show you 2 views here. I'm going to show you the department view. So what you're looking at right now is the dashboard for the entire government. And so when OMB implemented category management, they naturally had targets for every federal agency. And this is talking about at a department level. It doesn't go down to, for an example, HHS. You have Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, Food and Drug Administration. These kind of targets that we're talking about for spend under management and best in class, they don't trickle down specifically to the bureau level. It stays at the department level, but everything the bureaus do obviously roll up into how the department does overall. So what you're looking at right now, at least of these circles at the top, is how government's doing overall in terms of trying to meet their targets. Now, it doesn't look very good right now because we're halfway through the fiscal year. But of course, when you're talking about that last quarter, that's when you see government do a massive push in terms of the amount of procurements that they're churning out per agency. So I hopefully believe we'll get to the end for all of these circles here. But I also know that when you have a pandemic going on as well, that may slow things down. But you at least kind of can see how overall government's doing. Now, if you sit there and click this, you can notice that you can actually break it down by agency. And the one caveat is for DOD, they did break it down by services, and you can also see like DLAs right there. But for no one else did they actually break it down any more than that. So you can sit there and let me just look at HHS, even though I just looked at this like a few days ago. You can kind of see how they're doing. So for you as a vendor, this is good information to have because you can see that pretty much for all of government, no one's meeting their targets. Now, if you know what tier contract you're on, whether it's a 1, 2, or a 3, again, this is good marketing for you because now you're speaking our language. Hey, I'm on a tier 3 contract. I see you're kind of struggling with your best in class obligation. I'm in the field of either IT professional services or insert another common category name. I can sit there and help you with these procurements. That's going to be more beneficial to you from a marketing standpoint. But you may be like, David, that's great. I can sit there and go from HHS to DOD. How about all of government at the same time? So if you click on this last tab, now you're going to see all 24 seal flagged agencies, how everyone's doing from spend under management on the left and best in class on the right. So I semi-colorblind. I want to say that's like what a dark blue over orange is kind of bar. So clearly no one right now, because the dark blue is not overtaking the orange, no one's really doing that well with the exception of energy, but that's a rare case right there. But you can see everyone's not meeting their goal right now. And you saw that obviously from that department view. But you can sit there and now look at every single agency. You may be managing 2 or 3 different customers, so now you can kind of see every single one of them all in one view. So that's kind of one tab there. So let me go to the award exploration tool. So I have vendors ask me every once in a while, hey, you know, I work with HHS or another agency, and I want to kind of understand, you know, which contracts and understand the awards. You could actually do that all here. I will say this, because I do this presentation so much now, I've noticed that the server is a little bit slower than normal, but I also think it's because everyone's home. But when you're sitting there pulling data, if you can at all avoid it, try not to hit the all button. I did that, a couple of days ago, and I'm sitting there trying to pull this data, and I noticed the system crashed on me. I asked one of my friends who built this, I said, hey, you know, what's going on? Because normally that's not an issue. And she just said, yeah, when you sit there and click on the all and you're actually going for multiple fiscal years here, it's just so much information, you're going to crash the system. So if you can, just please just click on the agencies you need, only the fiscal years that you need. So let me just kind of show you, for example, I'm going to just pick DOE, let's pick energy. Let's do something a little bit different here. So you're going to see all of the awards made by energy. And you can pick which fiscal years. Normally, I'm going to pick 19 just because I want a full fiscal year. And I'm pretty much not going to change anything else. I want all of the tiers in terms of spend under management. I want all the categories. I'm pretty much going to leave it at that. So you're only, where's the data? You need to hit this results set tab here, and then it will kind of take all your filters, and you're going to see all of the information. Now, your natural tendency is going to be, I'm going to hit the download button, and then, oh, actually, it works now. Okay, they fixed that. Normally, when you hit the download button, this cross-tab option is not there, but I'm just going to sit there and make sure I tell you one more tip. So anywhere within this field, you can just click anyone. So let me just click share in here. So I'm going to click that, left click it. Because I'm afraid if you don't do that, you won't get the data set that you see. And then you sit there and hit cross-tab. That's the closest thing you're going to get to Excel. And you hit that, and there'll be one more screen. It will, right now it needs to load, and then you sit there and download the file. And then you'll see that in the bottom left-hand corner of the file downloading. We're talking about, what is that, 12.1 megabytes. Wow, that's actually a pretty big file. So you basically have all of the awards that DOE made in FY 2019. Now that you have it in a Excel format, you can sit there and slice and dice it however you want, and you sit there and, you know, make a pivot table or what have you. So that's how you can sit there and grab all the award information.
So David, another question here from the chat. No,
sure.
That's fine. And this pertains to specific socioeconomic classes. And the question was, where can we see progress toward goals for specific socioeconomic classes?
Good question. I will get to that in 4 more tabs. There's a small business tab there, and I will definitely cover that. That's a very good question, though.
All right. Excellent.
Or actually, sorry, 3 more tabs, because I'm actually on the contract inventory tool. So another question I get from vendors is, hey, I just started working with HHS or DOD or energy, you know, insert name of customer, and I just kind of want to know which contracts do they tend to use, because that's going to help me as a new business figure out which one I want to get on. So this is the perfect one. Again, please, if you can, avoid selecting all. I'm just going to pick DOJ just for something a little bit different. And then you're going to see all of the different contracts that DOJ uses, all of them, unless you sit there and start filtering it down by specific categories or what have you. But now you can see them all. And again, you can do the same thing. You can download it. Just click anywhere in the field, give it a second to kind of load right there. And now you can see from a contract standpoint which ones they use. Now, if you're wondering, can I drill down from each contract into specific awards? No, you cannot. That's why I showed you in the last one, the awards exploration tool. That one's going to show you all the awards and give you all the contract information, the PIDs, the contracting officer, the value, the category. But this one here, just trying to understand which contract this customer uses. And you can even go down from DOJ and go into a specific bureau if you want to drill down to that level, let's say do DEA. So you can kind of get a better idea of, if you notice that the table changed a little bit. So now you can kind of see that information. And just, again, it's more just like market research for you to kind of help you figure out how you're targeting this agency, which particular contracts they tend to use, and then figure that part out. So that's one thing, one really great thing about the contract inventory exploration tool. And I know I'm kind of going fast, but I want to make sure Marcel has time too, so I'm kind of watching the clock. So common and defense-centric spend tables. So you saw earlier in my presentation, you saw this table here, but I just broke it up over 2 slides. So you see where I pulled it from. And if anyone's wondering, we update the data, well, at least the team that runs this website, they update it every single month. It used to be like, I think every quarter, but now they've gotten down to every month. So now if you recognize this table, this is where I took it from. So let me just show you this small business tab, because that's something a little bit different. So what you're looking at here is all the 19 categories total, and then in terms of small business usage. Now I do want to highlight like this one, medical, where the numbers are a little bit on the low side, and I'll explain to you kind of why. So for medical, the predominant buy within that category is pharmaceuticals. And obviously those are the bigger players out there. So that's why you kind of see the numbers for small business may not be there for the pharmaceutical piece, but maybe for lab coats, masks, goggles, gloves, beakers. Like that's something more small businesses can kind of play in. So this is just kind of showing you for all the categories, percentage-wise, how is that looking for small businesses? Now, when you look at like aircrafts, ships, submarines, and land vehicles, again, I'm not a DoD person. The number's obviously a little bit low, but maybe because that's just a very complex item, this might be a little bit more difficult. But you do see small business usage in every single category, but just some are better than others. So I just want to at least point that out to you guys. And then again, you can also drill down by specific customer and even go down another level by bureau. Okay, small business dashboard. This wasn't working for me when I came. Okay, so it's still not working right now. So let me pivot back very quickly. So if that was working, this is what it should look like. Now, I will admit, this is when the screenshot you're looking at right now was from back in, I want to say January. And again, I told you these guys, the team updated and refreshed the system, but I'm going to make a note to them and tell them the small business dashboard's not working. So I really love this dashboard for the very simple reason of, if you're familiar with those small business scorecards, those only come out every single year. This is really a small business scorecard for every single customer, but it's live and you can kind of see how a customer is doing with their socioeconomic goals. The ones that I can tell you for HHS, for anyone that wants to work with them, HHS has never met their hub zone and service disabled veteran owned small business goals ever since the inception of that small business procurement scorecard. And that is something that they always tried very hard to meet those goals. I think they're for this particular year, I think if you take out the COVID-19, they were very focused on SEB, OSB, because that was something they felt that they were really close last year and they want to make it this year. I can tell you for HHS, they actually have monthly vendor outreach sessions. They used to be obviously in person, but they're now virtual. So if you just type in HHS vendor outreach sessions, you should be able to get to that website and register for a virtual session to talk to HHS small business specialists. And I'm confident other agencies do something very similar. But this is what it would look like. And again, you could sit there and drill down by specific department and go down to specific bureaus and even at the specific office if you know which one. And you can kind of see this data. I wish that was working right now, but this is what it should look like. All right, so let me bring this back. I'm down to the last one. I know I'm running a little on time. All right, the vendor managed spend report. Now this is one, I'll be really honest, I wasn't using this a lot before, but this is actually really cool. So you can see, once it's done loading, all the vendors that do business with the government. And you also, they've actually broke the spend down by tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which I think is really interesting, because when I look at that and I see a lot of maybe tier 0 spend, and that's no fault of the vendor, that's more on the contracting officer. They got to realize in some cases, like a Deloitte or Booz, they're on multiple contracts. Why you keep going open market to get that particular service or commodity, I don't understand. So we're trying to educate contracting officers, but you can kind of see all the vendors that do work with the government. You can, again, break it down by specific department. Again, you can go drill down another level. You can go by category. So let's just pick one for the sake of picking one. Let's just go with Department of Commerce. So now you see all the vendors that do business with commerce. So let me just pick CWG. And so now at the bottom, you kind of see their DUNS number. You see, oh, they're on NITAC. That's what they're using. And again, you can kind of see the spend across the board. Oh, I didn't even put percentages down. That's nice. So you can see how much of it is considered managed. Managed, remember, as long as we're moving away from that tier 0 into either a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, that's considered managed spend. So you can see they're doing a great job there. So that's, again, this is kind of a neat little tool just to kind of see how which vendors the government agency is using. And you also can, again, see the different spend and how it's broken out. That's actually really cool. That wasn't like that before. Okay, so let me go back here. All right, so let me wrap this up. So what you see here is a screenshot of a very massive spreadsheet. Massive, I mean 22,000 rows massive. It's called a 10 by 10 matrix, and this is something that comes out of our office. And what you're going to see, you'll have a link to this at the end, so you can kind of download that file for yourself. We're looking at all of the open market contracts out there for all of government, for every single agency, even going down to a bureau level. But as you can see, the highest opportunity here is $3.4 billion. It happens to be with HHS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid. That's actually mine, so I have the highest one. And it goes all the way down to, I think, I want to say, was it $100, $500. So that's why you have so many different expiring opportunities, and it's for all of government. So you can at least understand from a vendor standpoint what our focus is on, which contracts. So if there's opportunities where we can kind of work together to help each other out, definitely let me know. I want to say there's another, 12 of me, because there's a lot of accounts to cover. So we're all working off this spreadsheet. We even have local customer service directors that sit in specific states to support our customers that are working on this spreadsheet. So we're just basically trying to help customers move away from open market, preferably to a GSA contract vehicle, but obviously when we're not a better fit, and we're not always, we try to help them to go to another contract vehicle as long as it's within the government, just to make sure the spend is being managed correctly. So I want to bring people's attention to GSA Interact. You may have not heard of it. So if you don't know what GSA Interact is, it's our, I want to say like a Facebook, like social media website for vendors as well as for federal agencies. And the two screens that you see there, I feel like are the more important ones, at least of late. We have our multiple award schedules here on the left, and Marcella may cover a little bit more about our mass consolidation later. But because of that consolidation, where we're going from, I think, 24 schedules down to one bigger one, everyone has questions about it. They want to learn more about it. Definitely try to follow the multiple award schedules. When you get to the Interact page, you want to go to community and just maybe type in GSA Interact multiple award schedules and go directly to this page and then join it, follow it. So you're always aware of when we're giving out training for vendors, when there's anything new going on with the consolidation. I even threw in the mass PMO email. If you have specific questions, that's a great team there. They'll respond to you pretty quickly with your questions. On the right side is what we, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought I was, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just had another question to come through, and it was, and it's related to government setting and enforcing small business subtracting goals on these large procurements that have been awarded to big primes.
I can't talk too much about that. I don't know if Marcelo or Sandy, you can kind of respond to that question.
No, can you repeat the question? Because it came in fuzzy on my end. I can hear David perfectly.
Okay, all right. It's it says, is the government setting and enforcing small business subcontracting goals on these large procurements that have been awarded to big primes?
Well, I think I'm stuck on the word enforcing. I think they always push to meet all of their goals and all of their requirements in each of the departments. And there's a lot of pushback, and you go between the OSDBU office, which is an office that really champions small business. But at the end of the day, it really depends on the requirement. And if they can show in the requirement that it either has to go to small, large, or whatever the case may be, then that's where the requirement will end up, either small, large, and so on. So there is a lot of conversation, and I think there's a very honest push to have things go to smaller companies. But again, if the requirement's large, it does have to go, say, to Alliant Large, the Alliant contract, as opposed to the Alliant Small Business contract.
Marcel, this is Eric Fierce. I'd like to add that the contracting officers at GSA do review the required subcontracting plans for the large businesses, and that's part of the evaluation when we evaluate vendors on the performance of their contracts as to whether they did meet their subcontracting plans or not.
Thank you.
And just to throw in one last point, you can't see this because this is meant for federal employees, but within our office, we have something called storyboards, which are really just the dashboards, kind of what you saw earlier, but specifically geared towards each federal government agency. And part of that, there's a small business portion where we help our customers understand that, hey, some of these expiring contracts that you have could actually be done by small businesses. Now, because we're GSA, we can only talk about our small business contract. I can't sit there and say, well, this one would be good for a NITAC contract or a NAFTA suit, just because that's just not who we are. And so when contracting officers have an expiring contract, they can use this Tableau software that we provide through the website that you just kind of saw, and go to that dashboard and look at their expiring contracts, and then kind of click on it, and then it will kind of use a PSC and NICS code combination to show that, hey, on certain GSA contracts, we have vendors that match that criteria based on that combination that could potentially do the work. We're not going to sit there and say it's 100% guaranteed, but at least it kind of starts the conversation between the small business office as well as the contracting arm to say, hey, oh, wow, there really are some small businesses. We tell you which ones they are, off what contract it is. We tell you what tier the contract is, and then really it's up between those two offices to kind of sit there and figure out, could this be done? We also have something called a market research as a service. It's a free service that we provide to all of our customer agencies. We basically do the market research for them, and they can sit there and tell us that, hey, I want large to do it, I want small, I want both, which contract they want to market against within GSA. So that's another service that we offer. We also try to use those to encourage small business usage. So kind of get that in there.
Yeah, and so David, as we're, I guess, to follow up on these small business questions, two more that have come in. One is GSA requiring subcontracting to small businesses in their contracts? So that's the first question we'll take.
So this is Marcelo with Alliant Large.
Yes.
There's a plan in place for large businesses to have a subcontracting plan to small businesses, and that is enforced and reviewed on a yearly basis, and actually even a quarterly basis. So
okay.
And then the final measurement that takes place to see if the large vendors on Alliant Large have met their requirements for subcontracting to small businesses really does happen at the end of the life of the actual contract, but it is monitored throughout the period of performance.
And then as a follow-up, Marcelo, excuse me, where in GSA can small subcontractors go to determine if their large prime has met its subcontracting goals? Well,
with Alliant, they can go right to the Alliant program office and talk to the Alliant personnel about that issue. And then the other contracts, unless David knows of the other ones in more detail, like for example, Schedule 70, which is being consolidated to the large one, as David referred to, there aren't requirements for large companies to perform that subcontracting the same way they do on the Alliant GWAC.
Okay, thank you.
I could do this, Leonardo. I can definitely give you some points of contact that we work with in our small business office, if that would help give you some person to reference to sit there and get a more proper response.
Okay, excellent.
Okay. I'm making a note of that real quick. All right, so I know I'm putting a little bit over, but I'll try to wrap it up real quickly. So I just want to mention the integrated award environment. You might be like, what office is that? So within GSA, this specific office, the IAE office, they're the ones that manage all of our systems. So datasam.gov might maybe sound familiar, may actually bring some nightmares to folks. I know it does for me. When they took down like 10 systems and consolidated them all down into datasam.gov, I truly do miss fdo.gov. So that's a place where you might want to go to and join this particular community or group because they do offer training for vendors as well as federal employees about datasam.gov. They can provide you updates on it, more changes coming to it. I just want to mention these two that I feel like these are the two hotter topics when I talk to vendors, are mass consolidation and then datasam.gov. And if you're wondering, why didn't that include an email for the IAE group? They chose not to give me that. Just because they probably flooded. That team is very small. I'd say there's probably no more than 5 people that I'm aware of in that group. So yeah, they would be overwhelmed. Whereas the mass consolidation team is a little bit bigger than that. But I do say very literally, not that much bigger, but just a little bit. So datasam.gov. I wanted to provide this link to you guys in the Dropbox because the datasam.gov team created this pretty nifty PDF file with all these different links and what have you that I thought was really helpful, but I never found it on the datasam.gov website. So I thought, it's kind of weird. You made this really great guide or at least list of tools and videos and what have you, but you don't put it on the website so then no one can actually get to it. So I put it here so people can get to it. I can stay on the screen for like another second or two just if you want to screenshot it. But again, once you get this presentation, you'll have access to all this information. I did want to bring this up, and maybe Marcelo may cover this a little bit more in his presentation. I didn't even know about this until Marcelo told me. A vendor support center, and you see the link down there below, and that's a screenshot of the website designed for whether you're a new business trying to figure out how to navigate the government contracting, or whether you're more veteran business and you're just trying to help maybe increase sales. This website's for you. The information's right there. Just want to kind of mention that really quick. All right, so really quickly, so here, I'm going to stay on this for like a second or two if you want to screenshot this. So again, the top one is the dashboards that I was showing you earlier live, and then I had to show you a screenshot of the small business one. And then here is the 10 by 10 matrix. Again, it's very large files, like 22,000 rows of data. Those are for your downloading pleasure. Again, you can screenshot it or just wait till you get the presentation and you can sit there and get that information. And for the top one, you don't have to have any sort of special tip card or whatever. You just go to the website and just make sure you click the left icon for public access. There's a right one for feds that requires tip card readers, so you have to sit there and input a code to get in, but that one's for you guys there. And you pretty much have the exact same view as we do. It just took a long time for you guys to get there, for our team to kind of build that out. And so I'm finally done. I'm a little bit over. I don't know if there are any questions for me. I'm sorry to kind of go through that very quickly, but I want to make sure Marcel had enough time to cover his information as well. Awesome. Information overload. I'm trying to see how to, I don't know, Marcel, you can just take the presentation rights from me, or let me just stop sharing.
Okay.
And then you can kind of grab it yourself.
Right, he should be able to take over from there.
So are you able to see the presentation now, same way I do?
Yes.
All right, great. So how much time do I have, Leonardo?
We have until 10 o'clock.
Oh, okay, we have a lot of time. So like usual, I'll go off of my presentation and I'll tell you what I really need everyone in the group today to understand about what we do. We're here for you, and that is we act as a liaison between the vendor community and the contracting officers that handle schedule. And if you have other items or other issues that you have to deal with GSA on, such as Align Small Business, so on, all those GUX, we can put you in communication with those program offices or program offices and personnel in Oasis and other places as well. So we're always there to serve you. And the team is composed of Sandra McIntyre, who you'll see on the box of presenters, and Eric Fears, who's actually on detail, and he's here this morning to support us. So maybe he'll handle some of the slides at the end, because he likes talking about the portal, the acquisition portal, and some of the other tools that we have available. So again, we're here to support you. We can act as a liaison and help out companies. Let me give you an example of what happens sometimes. Sometimes companies hold a schedule contract, and we deal mostly with Schedule 70. So you're going to hear me mention Schedule 70. And for some reason or another, companies are unlucky or concentrating on their other areas of business or other contracts they're on, and they do not receive awards for their Schedule 70 contract. And then as the program office for Schedule 70, so we're not in Schedule 70, we're apart from them, we're a program office, but the Schedule 70 contracting officers they provide sort of like a sweep or a cleanup every year of what is happening on Schedule 70. And what that means is, if you haven't performed or I've received awards for over a year or 2 years at the minimum award of like $25,000 for the first 2 years that you're on the contract, they do want to terminate your contract. And if you have been active, at least with us, we can assist you in speaking to the contracting officer, proving that you're trying to get business on Schedule 70, and then therefore you wouldn't have your contract terminated. We've had that happen many times, and we've helped vendors. So again, that's just an example of what we do and how we can help you in the future in case you need us. You'll see that our contact information is at the end of this presentation. So once you do receive the presentation, you'll be able to contact us directly. So what we're going to talk about today is the multiple award schedules. And you've heard David mention that there's a consolidation effort. So we have about 24 different types of schedules. You know, there's a schedule for furniture, a schedule for medical supplies, for law enforcement to obtain materials there. And we also have an IT schedule. So you'll hear me talking about IT Schedule 70. Well, all of those contracts or all of those schedules are going to be under one consolidated mass schedule is what they're calling it. And we'll be able to have awards done for many different areas of that schedule, all under one task order, if that's what the agency would like to do. But again, everything's going to be consolidated. So we'll talk more about that, but you'll see that while we're in transition, we still are doing a lot of business on the individual schedules themselves. So the consolidation effort is underway. That's what we're doing now. And sometime in July, you'll see a major transition of everybody accepting the mod, and they'll have most of the vendors over, at least from Schedule 70 over to the consolidated one. So with schedules, you see a whole commercial goods and services directly being sold to the government and offered to the government. What our program office does is, again, we deal with IT matters. So anything under the IT umbrella is what we're going to talk about. We're actually responsible for different SINs, and let me explain what that is. So for those that don't know, a special item number, you'll hear us talking or speaking a new language, which is SINs, and that's an acronym. With SINs, they're basically what David was talking about, is category management. So the schedule has always been sort of broken down in that manner. And when you look at it, there's hardware and software that have their own independent SIMs. We deal with IT professional services. So that's all the labor that can possibly be used on an IT project. This small group is responsible for that particular SIN. And with the new consolidation effort, which I have to refer to that, we're going to be looking more at the NAICS codes that exist. They're going to be modified for GSA so that everyone can still understand them. And there's also going to be a crosswalk provided. So if you're under the old schedules and you're going to the new consolidated SINs, agencies are very used to what they've been doing for years and years and making awards referring to the SINs that we presently have. So that crosswalk will be available to them in a matrix or a table so that they can still search for companies and the types of services and products they need under the new schedule under these SINs, but we're trying to move everyone to this new coding system within the mass schedule. So you'll see more of that, and they do have an Interact site. So David showed you the Interact site. You can also sign up for what the contracting officers in Schedule 70, so that program office does provide a lot of updates on what's going on with schedules. One thing I do want to mention is that David was also showing you the spend to current date. Well, with IT Schedule 70, that schedule alone is over 16 billion per year. So there's a lot of work being done there. If you're in the IT field, then I would definitely highly recommend being on IT Schedule 70. We have over 3,500 or 3,400 vendors. The number goes up and down depending on what happens to companies on just the IT Schedule 70. And the reason for that is that almost everyone in the government has used the schedule, no matter what agency they're in.
Marcelo?
Yes.
Hi, this is Sandra. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask you if you're advancing your slides, because we can't tell. It looks like there's a circle, like maybe they're trying to load still, because we're not seeing anything but the title slide right now.
Oh, really? Did you see the movement now?
I'm not. Are you, David? I was just trying to coordinate with David Park on this. David?
Well, this is Leonardo as well. Okay, now I just see it. But yeah, I wasn't seeing any. I was going to mention that, and thank you, Sandra, because I didn't realize I had my mute on and I was talking. But yeah, I just saw like it was trying to download or what have you as well.
Yeah, it was hung, but I think you got it going now, Marcelo. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'll leave it like this. It's not in presentation mode, so you'll see the slides on the side, but I think it'll still work for everyone then.
Yeah, no, that's great. That looks good now.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Well, Marcelo, just so you know, we can see the slides on the side, but we can't read the slides on the slides on the side.
Yeah, I'm making them even smaller.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it.
So that the one in the middle expands more.
Perfect.
Yeah, because I had it in presentation mode. Sorry if you couldn't see it, but I'm really talking from the top of my head because I'm trying to give you the information that I really want you to hear first, especially if we're limited on time. But it looks like we're not. I'll go back to the slides so that you can follow a little better. That's a problem when I present. I want to give the information I want instead of what the team has put together on the slides. So let me. Okay, so there are a lot of benefits for being on schedule. When we usually talk to both the vendor community and the agencies, but when we do speak to the agencies, I think you need to understand some of the things that we tell them so that when you go out there and if you are inclined to be on schedules and also want to push so that the efforts of the government to order whatever it is that they need go on schedules, then you should hear what we tell them. And it's basically like a business development because we're trying to convince them to use schedules, right? So GSA schedules is really our primary goal for what we want them to use. And although there are a lot of vendors on GSA schedule, and obviously with the mass consolidation, it's going to be even more thousands on one schedule, although category management still keeps them in their place, sort of in their lane of products and services that they may offer. When it comes to IT, although there's, again, I mentioned 3,500 and more, we never get 10 or 15, 20 different proposals coming in for one acquisition effort that a particular agency in the government may be trying to execute. And obviously there's always anomalies that occur, and that only occurs when the project is so popular and may be worth so much money that a lot of vendors are focusing in on that particular project, and then you'll see all those vendors start proposing and trying to sell their services for that one project. But on the average, it's anywhere from 3 to 5 proposals that the government will receive on their schedule, even though we have thousands of IT vendors. And that's very important because that conversation always takes place, that particular topic, when we're speaking one-on-one with the agencies. And it is us visiting them the same way you do. So we do go there and speak to them. We give them a presentation, and this topic always comes up. And we explain to them that vendors do not have unlimited funds to bid on everything that the government comes out with as far as the solicitation is concerned. and we know this to be true, and you do have to target your and focus in on the agencies that you may be responsible for or targeting strategically. And that headache will never arise when they're only getting 3 to 5. So it's a healthy competition every time they have an acquisition is what we tell them, and that they won't be overloaded unless they are the anomaly and they have the most popular project of the year, which does occur in some cases. So we do speak to them about that, and that settles them. So they're always worried about, oh, you have thousands of vendors. What are we going to do when we receive all of these proposals? We won't be able to rate them. It'll take forever. That is not the case. So we tell them that, and if you go out there and tell them that, that'll convince them to use schedules. And then it actually is a very easy way to order from schedules. So the other point that I like to make is a topic that always comes up after that is, well, now we don't have control of our contract. And this also happens when they look at all of the GSA GWACs as well. We don't have control of our contract, so that's why we don't want to use GSA. That is not the case. They have total control of their contract. In fact, I tell them that we don't even know if they award until it hits our database maybe a month later or 2 months later when the data is inputted into our database. That's the only time we know. And in other instances, we know only because they ask for our help and we're assisting them through the acquisition process, maybe with example documents, doing a scope review to ensure that they're within scope of their contract and what they're trying to do with the SINs that they're using within the contract. So we give them all of those services for free, and we can give them a memo or some kind of email that states that so that they can keep that in their record in case they ever have an audit to show that what they're doing is within scope and then that GSA personnel has reviewed it. But that said, going back to the control of their contract, their CO, their contracting officer at the agency will award for them and control the contract. Now, there are some instances where agencies do not have the personnel or the bandwidth to take over all of that work, and GSA does provide COs for a fee, obviously, for the CO to be part of their team and award on their behalf. And those are other program offices within GSA that you're probably aware of, but if not, one of them is called FedSyn. They deal with high-priced IT projects. And then the other one's AAS, which deals with IT and everything else that government may be ordering. And AAS stands for Assisted Acquisition Services, and they're located across the U.S. in different regions that we have within the United States. And even overseas as well. So they do assist DoD, for instance, say in Germany, where we have a base. So all of those instances, GSA may help them, and then there we are more involved with the acquisition and maybe taking control in some areas, but it still is an integrated team that has to move forward with the acquisition because they know the requirements more better than anybody else. So there are cases like that. If you do need assistance with something like that, then please give our program office a call and then we'll assist. The other thing that I didn't mention in the beginning, not only do we act as a liaison with you, but we can also sort of co-present, or in a way you can make introductions to us with an agency that you're speaking to. Let's say they're on the fence, they're not sure whether they want to use IT Schedule 70 or not. They may be leaning to another contract that you're not on, but you're on schedules. Then you can make an introduction. We'll go over there and present to them, have a government-to-government conversation to try to convince them to use schedule and why it's so beneficial to use schedules. So some of the obvious things that you're going to hear is, and this is also due to category management, so we're piggybacking on what David said, we're going to eliminate duplicate contracts by doing so. With the consolidation effort in specific, we have all the terms and conditions now in the universally composed into one area. We have the ability to award on multiple different types of categories under one task order. It just makes it a lot easier for agencies, where before they can use all the schedules at once under one task order, but this makes it actually much easier. So for instance, if you were building out a data center, and I do mean from the ground up, where you needed construction, but then you also needed the IT portion of the data center as part of your project, before you would really have to have two different contracts, or really the government agencies would have to have two different contracts Now, there are many possibilities that we're looking into. We haven't seen what the consolidation is going to bring, because again, it has to be put in place. But what we're looking into is that at least our office sees a possibility of this all being under one task order. So very different, construction and IT now together, and it's going to be completely lawful because we can do it all under one acquisition. So this could take place. There's a lot of opportunities for vendors to team up with each other to perform a project like this and give the government what it needs. That's something I just want to put out there as an idea. And I think that a lot of these efforts can be consolidated into one, which doesn't mean that it's going to affect the vendor industry in a negative way. I think it's just going to provide more opportunities to work with other companies and to perform and provide more services and products in some ways. But again, at the beginning, I think it's just to make it easier to manage one's schedule. So for instance, if you are into different lines of business and for this example, we'll keep it to IT and construction. If you do perform both, now you can have it all under one schedule. So administratively, it should be easier for your company to manage that one contract, one schedule, instead of multiple schedules that you may have had to be on in the past. Another example of that could be that you provided professional services, sort of like architects and other types of non-IT professionals, but you've also provided IT Schedule 70 type services, which is, database administrator and so on. What happens there is it's all going to be under the mass consolidation schedule and will allow you to provide all of those labor categories for that one project. Okay. So this is more of a repeat, talking about category management. I think David covered it in way more detail than we have it here. We have it at a very high level, but everything is organized in this manner. So we have very large categories, and then obviously we drill down and we go to a micro level where we have SINs and NAICS codes and so on, which is what I referred to in the beginning. Again, SINs are grouped items and services to provide a solution for the government, but it's also like going down that supermarket aisle that David showed in his PowerPoint presentation. We had a picture of that, say all the canned goods are on one side, and then we may have potato chips and other things on another aisle and so on. Well, it's the same thing with the contract. So that easeability of use is still going to continue even under the consolidation. It just makes it easier, and again, easier for companies to manage their schedule under the SINs. And let me take a little pause here. Are there any questions? Because I can take questions and make this conversation be a lot more dynamic. Are there any questions?
So I haven't seen any in the Q&A box, and so I'm guessing then that everyone is following you okay.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much. But again, anyone can feel free to ask questions, because and then we're on the exact slide that I may be presenting or what you hear me talk about. It makes the conversation more dynamic and a lot easier to do. So here, again, at a very high level, this is how everything is being broken down with the schedules. It's really the same thing that David was talking about, what we've done in the government, just more focused on what's happening with schedules, but this is the breakdown. And then on the following slide, where we get more to the IT subcategories, is where we live. We have a further breakdown where we have IT training, telecom, IT services, and so on. And here I'll take the opportunity to let you know that we do work closely with some of these program offices that are responsible for these particular subcategories. We'll be doing the sort of like IT services, the electronic commerce, and the IT training if you need anything. And then another thing that our small group is responsible for are contact centers, which is actually a new subcategory as of, I would say, October of last year. So it's about a year and a half now that we've had contact centers available through the schedules, and that provides an array of different services and technologies that are available for contact centers. a further breakdown of where we were with those preceding slides. And this is where we stand. We're responsible for those sins right there to the right where it's a gray box and we can provide any help. Oh, it looks like I got a pop-up. There's a question in the Q&A box. I'll read it out for everyone. What is the process for vendors to transition from the old schedules to the new ones? Okay, Sandra and Eric, please feel free to chime in, but you should be receiving a modification from the government to the contract, and then you would accept that modification, and that would put you into the new mass consolidated schedule. Sandra, do you have anything to add to that?
That is correct. Anyone that already currently holds a GSA contract under the old GSA schedules program should have received notice that there's a mass modification they need to accept. And they have until July 31st to accept that mass mod. And then it rolls them under the new structure. So they're on the consolidated schedule moving forward. And if they don't accept by July 31st, apparently then they're not going to be seen or represented under the GSA tools and the systems for searching. So it's important for them to accept the mod to move into the new solicitation. Now, if you don't already have a GSA schedule, you would then apply for your GSA schedule using the new consolidated offering. And you wouldn't have to worry about any transition at this point. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, and we should actually we should continue this part of the topic. So if you need to get a new schedule, you're going to be sending your documentation and you're going to be considered for the mass consolidation. And Sandra, then they also have to pick all of their NAICS codes so that they can be represented under those NAICS codes.
Correct.
Is there something else you wanted to add to that? Because there is a slight change, but we have like sub NAICS codes and so on. I know we've worked very hard with their program office so that representation for all the members can take place much better.
There is a crosswalk if anyone has questions and they think, well, I used to qualify or believe that I offered services under maybe the e-commerce special item number, and they're concerned about, well, how will I do that in the future? They could reach out to us and we could help them. There's a crosswalk that shows exactly mapping from the old SIN structure to the NAICS codes that fall within that, so they'll know where they fit best under the new consolidated schedule.
It looks like we have another question. Okay, so can NAICS and sub-NAICS be changed easily going forward?
Well, from what I understand, right, companies can self-certify or assign to their company what NAICS codes they believe they offer or that they are suited to support. Using sam.gov, correct? I think Eric, chime in, please.
Yeah, so the other thing with these NAICS codes is that, so there's two issues. One, you're already on the mass consent. You're new to schedules and you're going to be applying to get a schedule and you'll be on the mass consolidated one. Or you're a vendor that already has a schedule contract. Okay, so with a company that already has a schedule contract, they're going to transition you based on the matrix that's already been created, and that's that crosswalk that we've been referring to. And if there is a problem with that, you can either contact us or definitely go directly to the contracting officer at GSA that has been assigned to your company, and they will assist you with that if you have any issues with the NAICS that you actually received. So that is an important thing to review, and your contracting officer in your company is to speak to the CO at GSA, the contracting officer at GSA, to discuss that issue. If you are a company that does not hold a schedule and you want to be on schedule, you have to self-certify. But when you do provide all of your past performance examples that are going to be reviewed and evaluated so that you can obtain a schedule, that's when you clearly show that, oh, I performed this type of IT work, for example, and this is the type of personnel that I had on the project. So therefore, yeah, I do qualify for the following NAICS codes that are available, and you'll list those NAICS codes. And there'll be a review conducted, and then at that point, you'll obtain the schedule contract if all of the documentation is approved.
And one more thing I'll add, Marcelo, is that once you have a GSA schedule contract and perhaps you only offer a couple of different things under it, and down the road you pick up proficiency in a different area, you can submit a package, what's called like a modification package, to update your GSA schedule to request addition of a new special item number or NAICS code offering. You can do that down the road at any time, request a modification to add more. So that's the beauty of the mass consolidation, is that you can have under the same schedules contract various things. You can have IT related offerings, or I believe Marcelo alluded to this before, like construction or personnel or other items can all be under the same umbrella contract moving forward.
Yeah, I would also add, you can also modify your contract at any time to add more labor categories as well. So if you only had, say, a database administrator and a project manager, and now you have a network administrator that you can offer the government, then you can modify your contract to add those extra labor categories or products. One thing that I did see flash across the Q&A, Leonardo, is that I think we missed a question and now it's erased.
Actually, I can bring it back. I was thinking we had answered it. I'm sorry. So it was, yeah, so it's the one here that says, how easily will it be under the new schedules to be added to a new schedule? For example, I am on an IT 70 and would like to be added to what was PSS.
Oh, okay. So then, yeah, Sandra did address that. It would be a modification to obtain, say, the NAICS codes for what PSS is going to be offering under the mass consolidation. Oh, so here's another one, another question. Can that modification be done by vendors online? So I think you're referring to, can you submit all of your documentation via some internet website or something online through GSA? And the answer is yes. We do have tools for you to do that, and your contracting officer would register with the GSA and go into the systems and provide those modifications. In fact, in some cases, they had pull downs for example, the cloud SIN, so everything that was cloud infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and so on. Not the whole system isn't uniform, so they did have like pull downs for what you can do with cloud. And you can submit a PDF or a Word document through the system itself, and it would post, and then eventually the contracting officer at GSA would log in at their end on the administrative side and also pick up that information. And what does happen, just as extra information, sometimes those contracting officers in the schedules program will deal with program offices like ours to conduct a technical panel review of, say, the past performance and some of the questions that the contracting officer may have if they're not if they're overloaded with work, or they just need assistance with their workload, or they just have general questions. So for whatever reason, they may contact us, and then we'll work with them hand in hand as a team to evaluate all of this documentation. So that's another way that we also provide assistance or that bridge between the contracting officers and schedules and with you, the vendor industry. Okay. So now I'm on slide 9. That's a further breakdown for your information. So that's a nice slide to have in case you want a summary when you do get the copy of this deck. And now we go to things that we can consider as meeting requirements and so on. So I spoke about past performance. That will be evaluated. That's always a very common thing for anything, even at the task order level, for something like that to be evaluated. What are your projects and what have you done? So that's something that contracting officers and schedule would like to see, so that we can prove that, yes, you do sell these types of IT services such as cloud, and these are the agencies that you've worked with before. You can also provide projects that you've done with other industry members. So that is, if you worked for private and haven't done any work for the government, you can provide those past performances of those projects. Another thing to mention then is, if you're a very small company, you just started out, and sometimes you do not have these past performance examples to submit, you can take the experience of your executives. Say they've worked on these projects, they came from very large companies like IBM, Deloitte, Booz, and so on. You take the experience of these executives and you submit that as your past performance, and we'll evaluate that as part of your past performance if you don't have any projects right now that you can submit as examples. So that is something that we've created much flexibility within the schedules program for small businesses to flourish. And that's one of them. Because I guess the conundrum was, well, I started a business, but I don't have projects yet. But if I don't get on schedule, I can't market myself to most of the agencies within the government. What do? Well, you submit the personal experiences of projects that you have been on since you started this company. Okay. One thing that I did allude is that there is a minimum. I think there's a Q&A question. So before I get to
Yeah, it
that.
says, can small businesses use commercial projects as past performance?
Yes, exactly. That's what I was trying to say. So you can use all of your commercial projects as past performance, including what your executives have done within your company, if you don't have those past performance examples. So very flexible. Another thing that I think is very important to mention is that unlike GWACs, so the government-wide acquisition contracts, you've heard of Align Small Business, STARS, and even NITAC and so on, schedules is an open solicitation all the time. So that means you can apply to get on schedule at any time of the year, where GWACs do have an open and a closed date. So you either get on the GWAC or you don't, or you have to wait till there's an on-ramp. And sometimes those on-ramps can be difficult for all of those very large programs to have, mainly because of what they're dealing with in the paperwork and what is required by OMB and how they have to manage those things. But schedule for decades now has been put in place to be able to be open. And again, anytime you want to modify your contract, you can submit a modification. If you do not have a schedules contract, you can get one at any time by submitting your documentation and going through that whole proposal process. So very flexible, and it provides you with the whole playing ground, the whole arena of the government, because again, most agencies have used schedules in one form or another. And if those agencies haven't, or you run into personnel within, while you're doing business development, you run into government personnel that has never used schedules, we can train them to use their schedules. That's where, again, our program office comes into play. You call us, we get in contact with the individuals they're speaking to at that agency, and we give them training. And we bring in our contracting officers to also help out in answering a lot of contractual questions that individual may have. So that's another thing to keep in mind on how this program office can assist you in pushing those agencies to use schedules, or even some of the other contracts within the government, as David mentioned. One thing that I do have to mention is sort of a disclaimer. When we go there and you have made, say, the handshake between us and that agency member, we're not there to speak about your company. We don't do that. We just always provide a level playing field that's fair to every company that may be trying to get that same work. So what happens is we just talk to that government official in the capacity of, hey, this is what schedules, or this is what these contracts can provide for you, but we never talk about companies because you made that introduction. And we have that window popping up. So I do have a question from someone, and the question is, regarding past performance, does the flexibility refer to schedules and GWACs only? Well, I've been talking mostly about schedules, about the past performance. GWACs you would have to read the solicitation on GWACs on what they want for past performance. They've handled on the latest GWACs, like for Alliant Large and Alliant Small Business, which unfortunately is under protest at this time. They've handled their past performance and how they evaluate very differently than what has traditionally been done by the government. To give you some background on that, is that they had vendors submit all of their documentation, past performance, and provide their own score. And the score obviously isn't accepted. It has to be evaluated to see if what the company is submitting really does fall within a score to begin ranking you among all of the other companies that have submitted their proposals to get onto Alliant, for instance. So that was a very detailed process on how that worked. I wasn't involved with it personally, so I can't give those details, but unfortunately, Alliant Large has closed. So you really can't get on Alliant Large at this time unless they do have an on-ramp, or if they have another version of Alliant coming out, if we see that the ceiling, we get very close to the ceiling. And that's just a matter of time, and that's something that has to be monitored. Obviously, if that was to be the case, then that program office would be announcing it to all of the industry, letting you know that, hey, look, we're looking into this. What do you think? They go back and forth. They hold many forums. They're open forums so that you can discuss what your ideas are. And we do take everything into consideration, whether it's positive or negative, on how it would impact the industry. But we're always looking out, number one, of what the government needs. So although you are our industry partners and partners in a sense of we get the work done together, the main focus is always going to be what does the government need, because we're trying to address the citizens' needs and all of our mission requirements. And that's really just a nice way of telling you, hey, don't feel bad if some of your ideas don't take hold. It's only because they may conflict with all of our agency partners and what they're telling us their requirements are. So we take that into consideration, but everything is really looked at. We do have another question here. Given the strong emphasis on past performance, how is GSA reaching out to non-traditional businesses to inject innovation into the government? Okay, I'm going to make some assumptions on this question and I'll state them. I think the easiest one to use as an example is cloud companies. So we know that there are a lot of cloud technologies coming out. You see the advertisements on TV and what these cloud technologies and services can provide. What we try to do is we actually have been, there is an effort within GSA to get these contractors, these vendors onto schedule. So we have, in one way we've done that is by reaching out to these individuals. The other way we do it is by speaking to agencies about technologies that they're looking at and what they want to implement. So let's say it's the cloud space. They tell us about these technologies and companies, and then we go after these companies and speak to them and say, hey, look, we understand that some of your services and products are wanted or needed within the government. Have you considered using schedule? And then we tell them about, then we train them on schedules, and that is, we do have information on our websites, and we also do hold, and schedules program used to hold classes on how small businesses can get on schedules and what they need to do for business development. So that's kind of how we've been doing it at this time. We have another question here. Do you reach out to small businesses, or are they all large cloud businesses? No, we reach out to small businesses. And what we've seen so far with this particular example on cloud is that a lot of these technologies are coming from small businesses. So we do try to get them on schedule. I think the problem comes in is with, since they're always dealing with commercial businesses, the cloud technology companies, they're always dealing with commercial. They don't consider government sometimes. So there is a sort of like a training and convincing that has to take place for them to get on schedules. And then the biggest issue sometimes is that once you do become a contractor for the government and you get on, say, schedules or on some kind of GWAC, then your books are open. So all of that accounting has to be revealed. And some companies do not have the personnel to make that happen, even within their systems. That is a barrier. I don't know how that's going to be addressed at this time, but I know that those conversations do take place. Unfortunately, I don't have more positive information to give you on removing those barriers, although I'm talking about it and stating it now. But yeah, there is an outreach for all of these companies to come into schedules so that these services are available to us. Okay, so, okay, no other. Okay, it looks like we have another question here. If we start the process to self-certify and submit materials toward a GSA schedule to offer services in what used to be professional services schedule, what is the estimated turnaround to get on the schedule? Okay, so for the existing schedules the way they are now, before the mass consolidation actually fully takes place, is that they try to have a 45 to 60 day turnaround on any documentation that comes into schedules. So that's what takes place there. There is something called fast lane. Now, the way that works is, let's say that there's an imminent solicitation or request for a proposal that's coming out from the government, and you're able to obtain proof that that is happening. When all of that information is submitted through the fast lane process, which by the way you can do through the web, then that program office reviews it and says, okay, yes, there is proof that this solicitation is coming out within, say, the next month or the next 3 weeks. What they do is they accept you to the fast lane program and they review your documentation, and they try to turn that around within 10 to 14 days. What happens sometimes is that, unfortunately, they get overloaded and everybody tries to go through the fast lane process, but there isn't a solicitation coming out from an agency that's imminent, and it may be a year from now or 2 years from now when they're going to actually release that solicitation. So unfortunately, that program office gets bogged down with these urgent requests to get onto schedule. Please review, the company's there like saying, hey, look, accept me into the fast lane program. Please review my documentation because I need a schedule right now to bid on something. And that's not the case. So then obviously that takes up a lot of time, and that hurts other companies that actually really need to be in the fast lane process. So I'm just putting that out there so you understand that, hey, please, be discriminated in how you apply to get the schedule. And it's really not as difficult as some companies think that it is. I mean, you can actually do the paperwork, and there is training online on what is needed. We do have another schedule. Another question. I apologize. Let me read it. Many small businesses feel like they have to hire consultants. Okay, that's exactly what I was referring to. So many small businesses feel like they have to hire consultants to help them get a schedule since they perceive the process to be onerous. Okay, will the new consolidated schedule allow small businesses to get on the schedule without having to hire experts? Okay, so I shortly alluded to that, and I'm glad you followed up with this question. The answer is no. You do not need to hire experts or these consulting companies to create your documentation by any means. I would say the only time that's beneficial for some companies, and I've heard from the companies directly, is that they tell me, hey, look, we're a 2-person shop, or, we have 10 employees, but none of us perform this type of work. And all of the employees are engaged in the work that they're doing presently. So they don't have the bandwidth or anyone to actually fill out the paperwork, including the owner of the small business. He's like, no, I'm doing a lot of business development and there's no way I can focus in on this. Then obviously you have to outsource that. That's sort of like the same idea of you outsource. Instead of building a small data center for your 10-person company, you go and outsource all of your back office your software that you need. You outsource your your paychecks, your payroll, and so on. So this would be the same idea. You know, you don't have the bandwidth, the resources to do it, but you do have the capital resources to pay someone to do it and get it done for you, then you go that way. I do have to say that although you have one of these professionals doing it for you and they dedicate their time to doing that, you do have to provide them with input so that they can create their proper documentation to submit. Otherwise, it's going to be rejected and you're going to be going back and forth. And obviously with your contractor putting in more hours. So there is time that you're going to have to dedicate to providing that consultant with the information they need to submit. Okay. We'll move on to slide 11. And it's okay, we have more slides. You can always contact us and we'll give you the information. The other thing is I have skipped around and hopefully provided you with information that's going to be salient to what you're looking for and wanting to know, and your questions also do help out. So it's not crucial that we go through all of them. Leonardo, feel free to interrupt me, I guess, if we're running out of time. We haven't mentioned it before, but schedules is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. So you'll always hear IDIQ as the acronym of choice. And the other thing is we can see that with BPAs. One thing that schedule has is it allows for blanket purchase agreements, where GWACS has always fought and inquired about being able to put BPAs, blanket purchase agreements, in place, and you cannot do that. A lot of agencies have asked us to go through that, and every so often, like every year or two, we have these very large department heads talking to us about creating BPAs under GWACS because they do like our GWACS and how they provide services for the government, but we do have to steer into schedules to do that. And really you can get a lot of the same things on both contracts, but they're different and depends on the strategy of the agency. So it's really up to them to what contract they use, but they can create BPAs if necessary under schedules, and that could be very beneficial to the agency on how they work. They could either be single or multiple award BPAs. So single is obviously one vendor being on the BPA and they get reoccurring work whenever the agency has work to be performed, or it's multiple award where they can recompete every time a task order, they can recompete a task order between the vendors on that BPA, or they can use other methods and actually go round robin, where if there's 3 vendors, vendor 1 gets the first task order, 2, then 3 follow, and they can go around and around like that. It really depends how the agency sets it up. So there are a lot of flexibilities that the agencies have by using schedules. These are the types of topics that we speak about in our conversations with agencies. Just be aware of that. Again, it's something that when you go and do business development, if that gets thrown at you, like, hey, you know, we're thinking of a BPA, and they're like, oh, okay, then let me tell you about BPAs. That's the conversation you would have with them. So that's very important to know. You know, here we have a statement about the simplified acquisition threshold. I know that some memos have come out recently because of this pandemic emergency that the whole world is under, but specifically this country, that some of those thresholds have been moved up, but for the emergency only. So eventually they will probably move back down to their original limits. But just for you to know that, yes, they can do a simplified acquisition. They can do an order under the simplified acquisition threshold, and all of those things depend on how they have to do their competition and announce their RFP, the request for proposal that they may come out with. So a very important thing, especially when you're dealing with small businesses, is can we do set-asides for procurements? Yes, we can under schedules. We can do a set-aside. What we can't do, which always comes up, is a direct order under schedules. Now, there are always exceptions to everything. So we're under an emergency. If we're under an emergency, you may see direct orders and you're thinking, hey, what's going on here? Well, those are the anomalies. And the agency actually seeks, they have to justify why they would do something like that, and then that would be part of the record, record of file that they put together for their contract when they're managing that. So there are those cases in an emergency or non-emergencies that they can still do that. But that aside, the normal thing is that you can do set-asides, but not direct orders. So even if you are an 8A vendor or you have qualified for that program, been certified under it, you can't receive a direct order. Now with STARS, which is one of our GWACs at GSA, all those direct orders can take place under that GWAC STARS that we have, but not under schedules, unfortunately. But the set-aside does help out because, as David was mentioning, the government agencies have a lot of requirements, not only to use the contracts that exist in the government and not go full and open, which was that tier 0, but really to meet a lot of their other strategic goals, which is, how many acquisitions do we have for small businesses? How many are veteran owned? How many are hub zone and so on? Under all those categories that you're probably that I would assume that you're familiar with. And if you're not, please call us and we can assist with more information on that. But we can do set-asides on that. Are there any questions about this one? Because this sometimes is a big topic depending on the agencies that we speak to. I'll let the thing pop up if you have any questions, and then we'll address them. One major tool that we have is eBuy. So a lot of their vendors get their information from eBuy. They go back and forth and submit their documentation. So when we have a request for a quote or proposal, and they come out on eBuy, we can use that system to record the time the proposal comes in and so on. So it is very beneficial for the agencies, but for you do get notifications of all the solicitations that come out. So that's a very important tool that we have here at GSA. So I do see that we're at 9:43. Leonardo, do I have more time to go through the slides, or would you like to jump in now?
Well, I would say probably just maybe we'll do, I guess what I would say, a hybrid, in the sense that maybe you can hit the slides that you feel like you really need to cover, or rather if there, and I know you did this earlier, but if there's anything else that you'd like to elaborate on just to make sure that it gets covered, I think that, certainly as we've committed to earlier, we'll be sharing the slide deck. And so that way, if there's something specifically that people need to go back to, they can. But I would say, just because of time, just to really touch on perhaps those things that you just really want to make sure that everyone is clear on, and so forth.
Okay, yeah, this is also a great time to ask more questions if you like. So I switched to slide 12. I did cover a lot of this material because I do skip ahead in my head. And these are the socioeconomic categories that I was referring to on 2 slides before. So you can't do direct awards, but you can do a set-aside in schedules. If you are under one of these categories, then you can definitely push agencies to do that. And if agencies have any questions, turn them to us. Send them to us, and we'll start addressing all of these things for them. And we can give them resources and everything that our policies have written down. Oh, so this is definitely something we need to touch on. Order level materials, I would say it's approximately 2 years old now. And it's actually something that a lot of people don't know about it. Your company may, if you're on schedules, your company may have received the modification for you to accept this. And hopefully your company did. We know that in IT Schedule 70, it was already in the 95 percentile that most companies have accepted this. But unfortunately, it's not easily understood. We do have another program office, and including ours, sometimes we do this in the training for order level materials. It's over an hour long. Here is the summary of it. Order level materials allows you to, allows the government to purchase materials under schedules, right? We're talking about schedules, and labor. So it's not just something tangible, but it's also services as well. So in like labor categories, database administrator, program manager, and so on, you can obtain it under order level materials. there are limitations for order level materials. So you can see there at the last bullet, which is an important thing that in every training they really focus in on, is that the agency can't spend more than 33.33% of the total value of their task order on order level materials. But what I tell agencies about order level materials, OLM, is that it actually provides them with a safety net. Sometimes they may have a 5 to 10 year contract that they put in place for some technology or service to be implemented within their agency. And as everybody knows, technology changes all the time and pretty rapidly. So as they're implementing the database system across the US, something changes in the communications portion of the project, and they're thinking, oh, we need to upgrade, or we need to put this in place for the system to function correctly or more efficiently, or whatever the case may be. But it falls within scope, but it wasn't put in there as a requirement. With OLM, it allows you, because to purchase that product, the service, and the labor to put that technology in place, because it falls within scope, even though it wasn't conceived of at the beginning of the project, at the beginning of the requirement. They didn't know about it. The technology just was invented in year 3 of the period of performance of the contract that they hold with you, the vendor. So that provides the government with a safety net as far as, oh, I can do this within my same task order, my contract that I'm holding right now. I can raise the ceiling if I need to a certain degree, to a certain level. That the contracting officers can raise the ceiling if more money is needed to purchase these items and services. And they do not have to have another acquisition like in the past. In the past, if the requirement wasn't identified at the beginning, then no contracting officer would ever allow the IT people to purchase that technology in the middle of the period of performance. They're like, hey, no, you didn't, no way, we're not accepting this, I'm not signing. And the contracting officer was going to be liable and if they were found guilty of not doing something within scope or practicing the right policy under the contract. Now with OLM, that safety net's there. Another acquisition doesn't have to take place. They can order it immediately. It's just, you go there, they speak to their vendor, their contractor, and it can be executed. Great safety net. That's what I talk to agencies about. Then we do go into issues about how you calculate the 33%, and we speak to them. We show them the policy and how that works. We tell them about how they can sort of slide in travel costs into OLM. Although it's an ODC, other direct costs is the umbrella of everything we're talking about, and we get into specifics about that. We tell them, hey, look, there's no way you can do this into including your travel costs. So that doesn't really affect you in this conversation. I'm just letting you know what happens when we do speak to them. So that background information, I hope, is useful to you. Vendors have to have the OLM SIM. Before, it was an issue of invoking OLM on a contract for agencies if you didn't hold this. So that's why we always tell you, hey, please accept this modification. But again, we know that over 95% have accepted the mod, so it's not an issue at this point. But please take a look at it, because again, that's something that you should tell them that needs to be put into the. So when the solicitation takes place, the requirement they're signing a contract with you, they have to specifically say that OLM is a SIN or is available or can be part of this contract for it to be invoked in the future in case it's needed. So that's something you need to talk to them about, make them aware of it, because they may not know it. They can always mod the contract to actually put it in there. But again, sometimes industry wants to protest when it's really not the right thing to do. As you can see, I don't like protests when they're not, when it's just a sneaky way to stop doing business, and you're not supposed to do it. But that said, OLM should be in the beginning. It can avoid protests that aren't necessarily warranted because the government needs it, and it could be an emergency to complete the project successfully. but we can talk to them more about that, and we can talk to you and educate you more on OLM if needed. We have a whole presentation on that. Prices are established at the task order level. So usually what happened before in the past, there were mechanisms, in fact, a mechanism that has expired, allowed to expire because OLM is in place now, where vendors could acquire items and services from other companies that are on schedule, the schedule contract for the agency. Now with OLM, the vendor, the actual prime contractor can do that directly. But what this allowed for was for you, what it allows for now is for the agency to actually establish that price with you, the prime contractor, at the task order level at the time that you're going to order it. So again, more flexibility for agencies, obviously more flexibility for you to complete and provide you with a road to success, because you can offer all of the technologies that are needed that may have not been conceived for in the beginning. By having it all under one acquisition, the agency and you can monitor the project much better and control it as both the agency and you work together to complete the goals of that project. So very important. OLM is highly important. We'll move on to the next slide. Conduct market research, development leads. Okay, so one of the main things that we hear from vendors, and at least the schedule program does, because they deal with you more directly in some cases, is we haven't gotten any business on the schedule. Well, the biggest issue is that you have to do a lot of business development to do so. Just obtaining a schedule does not automatically grant you business with the government. You do have to go out there and sell your products and do that dog and pony show. I think that's the expression that's been used in the past. But yes, you do have to go out there and shake hands and tell them what your company is all about and what services you offer. So we do have, now we're going to start getting into slides that have some links for you. And all of those links you can access them. And I think it's a pretty good read sometimes to give you more tools for what you need and information. So as Sandra mentioned earlier today, for the companies that do hold a schedule right now, you're going to be asked to go onto the mass consolidated schedule with a modification that's been pushed out by us, the government, GSA. The deadline is July 31st, so that's a very big date. But they are moving across everyone on each individual schedule so that these companies are moving over. There's marketing that we do, there's training, that's on us. We can help you out with that. And then we do have a steps to success. And I think David actually had that up today with the screenshot. So again, here's the URL for it. Please use it. It could be very helpful to you.
And Marcelo, just real quick, this question might get answered in these links that you're providing. But there's a question here about where can we find past GSA solicitations and contract awards?
Hey, Eric, does anyone have that link? You mean what solicitations are available from the government now? Is that what the question?
I think it said past. So I think if they wanted to see, for instance, I'm guessing previous solicitations and who it was awarded to and perhaps the amount and so forth. I mean, I know that there, I think, are some other, I guess, not software, but I guess websites where you can see who holds certain contracts and so forth. That's what I'm guessing they're asking when they say, where can they find it?
Hey, Sandra, I know that we have access to those databases. I'm not sure what their level of accessibility is to see the prior awards.
Not 100% sure either if there's a central site that is open to the public there. I know that obviously there could be a FOIA request if there's a specific
we can take that.
Seeking information on.
Right, we can take that. Okay, we can see everything, but I'm not sure what accessibility is granted to the vendors. So let us take that question back, and we can find out with the program office that controls the system to see what vendors are allowed to see and not see.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? In thinking about this, and I'll look on this as well because for some reason I feel like I've also spoken, and I don't know the one specifically, but I'm pretty sure that I've spoken to at least 2 or 3 members as we've talked about our programming, where you can go to some of these databases. I think it may be a fee for service, but where you can find out um, this type of information.
Okay. Yeah, we'll send the answer back to you, Leonardo, and then you can go to your chamber members and give them the answer and potentially the link if we do find out that they can have, I would say, pretty deep access. What we do know that when we do see the data is that it is it's very extensive. So you're going to get thousands and thousands of records. So we'll see what we can find for you. Okay, so for market research, GSA past awards are okay. So this is all to the same.
It's all tied in there together.
Okay. So is USAspend.gov an option? David, you want to chime in on USA Spend? I know you present on that one.
David, you are on mute, I believe.
Actually, I don't know if David is still on because I'm not, as I look at the list of participants. Oh, okay, David Park. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, David, you're on mute.
Okay, there you go.
He's off now. He's off mute.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say I unmuted myself, but you guys still can't hear me. So, what was the question again, Marcel? Which website were you talking about? USA Spending?
Yeah, USAspend.gov to see if we can see prior solicitations. I don't think it drills down to that level, though.
I don't believe so on USAspending.gov. Like the one thing that came to my mind was eBuy Open, but I don't know if vendors could get access to previous solicitations there. I want to say that's only for federal employees, but I'm trying to double check right now to see if eBuy Open could be a potential source. But again, I'm still trying to log in. Like I just can't log into eBuy Open. I have to go through the gateway to actually get to it, which I don't remember having to do before. So kind of a convoluted way to get there.
Yeah, I feel sorry that we can't give them the answer right away, but they don't give us those test accounts, the IT shop and the people controlling the system to see what vendors can see. They give us different rights and we can drill down. So we know that the information is available for the individuals that want to know about this, the answer. We just have to understand what rights vendors have to see past solicitations. Now with eBuy, all new solicitations are available to you, but obviously if you're asking, you probably know that.
And looking here, Marcelo, it's actually at 10 o'clock. So perhaps we can get ready to wrap things up if there's just kind of a last comment or what have you you'd like to make.
I think the only other comment is that you can look at the other slides that are following. They have a bunch of links to different e-tools that we have. And then you'll also find our contact information there. Please feel free to contact us at any time. And we're here to assist you with, trying to answer your questions or put you in contact with the right individuals. So, and that would really wrap it up for me. I think we hit all of the salient points that I wanted to make today, and they're here on the slides.
Excellent. So David, I want to thank you as well as Marcelo and Sandra for joining us today and sharing this information. Certainly, I think it's been extremely helpful for everyone that was able to attend. And also for those that are still with us, just want to remind you to check out the Chamber's website for upcoming events and things of that nature. In particular for this group, next week, we'll be having as part of our Scale Up series, a discussion on CMMC. And so that will be from 12 to 2 on the 29th. And then also on May 6th, we will also have, if you're a member of the Chamber, We will also be having the president of the Richmond, Virginia Federal Reserve District that will be sharing with us his insights as relates to the economy, government spending, et cetera. And so that's going to be on May 6th. And then also April 30th, we'll have our legislative wrap up where we're going to shift gears and talk to members of our Maryland General Assembly about some of the things that took place during this previous session. And so again, want to just continue to bring your attention to that. And then also, want to also just thank all of our annual sponsors as well for their continued support of the chamber, and as well as our Bizbreakfast sponsors as well. And so again, thank you all for joining us. We'll be following this email with the presentations, as well as also with a link to the recording of this as well. And so again, David, Marcelo, and Sandra, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.